Okay, so I'm Joe Hamby, and I'm gonna give kind of my testimony, not just about Flat Earth, but in life in general, and go over some things with these different models, the heliocentric model, two different flat Earth models, and kind of break some things down. Had a lot of questions, so gonna kind of go through those things, but to start out with, my testimony to this is probably around 2004, 2005. I just started questioning a lot of things because some people had come into my life and kind of challenged me in ways to really make me take a look at life on a deeper level. And to begin to search the answers for why and what, I guess is a good way to put it. Originally, that search started out as I'm going to read the scriptures and find out if I can disprove them, even though deep in my heart and soul, I knew. I don't know how I knew, but I knew they were true, but I still wanted to try to disprove them. So I studied all the different, creation models or creation stories, from Scientology to Hinduism to Egyptology to Judaism to Catholicism, the Protestant movement, creating what we call the Christian church today, which is broken off into tons of different denominations, Islam, just all the different religions and what they had to say about our origins. And I also looked into the science for, I think now I'm going on over 15 years of studying this particular topic. But in that process, 2 years, when I first decided to start studying all these things, at 9 o'clock every night, I worked a job. I was working 50, 60 hours a week, 5-6 days a week, every week, for years. So I didn't really have time for much, but and at the time, if you'd asked me, I would probably told you that was a dead-end job, but turned out it's my career today, so that's pretty cool. At the time, though, when I was studying all this, I would come home from work, and no matter what was going on, at about 9:30, I would go and shut myself in a room and study from 9 to 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, every night for 2 years. Now, I've continued that for many years, just not as strictly. I give myself some time to have fun and do things that are interesting to me now. So by the time, I was just studying everything from every avenue I could. It didn't matter if it had anything to do with origin stories, science, cosmology, anatomy, biology, herpetology, entomology, all the ologies. It didn't matter. I wanted to study and try to understand as many of them as I could, just because once I discovered that the scriptures were true, a few of the biggest things in scripture for me were 1 Peter 3:15, that says, "Be ready to give a defense to any man who asks a reason for the hope that is within you with meekness and fear, according to the gospel of Jesus Christ." I think that's pretty close to saying it the right way. I don't have it word for word, and there's many different versions. And then Proverbs 25:2 says, "It's the heart of the Lord to conceal a matter, and the heart of a king to search it out." Proverbs 4:7 says, "Get wisdom, and in all you're getting, get understanding." Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call out to me, and I'll show you great and mighty things that you know not." Repeatedly throughout the scriptures, we're told to test all things, to search them out, to have answers, to be able to defend what we believe and why we believe it. Is called apologetics. And studying the scriptures and then finding out, wow, they actually are accurate in ways that we can't even imagine. They're so accurate and so intricately coded that there's no explanation other than a supernatural creator. So past that, I ended up helping teach a college and career class at the church I was attending at the time. And during that time, I had some teachings on prophecy, and that prophecy contained cosmology. And I started noticing inconsistencies in the cosmology we were taught and what the scriptures themselves teach. And then I started noticing the inconsistencies in the science of the cosmological model that we were taught, and how those inconsistencies weren't a problem for the flat earth model, which flat earth really isn't a good way to put it. We should actually say that it is a geocentric level enclosed topographical realm is the way to put it, because it's not perfectly flat. Nobody believes that. It does have topography, but it's level across that topography for the most part. And that's provable. I mean, we've already falsified the radius of the so-called globe, which is 3,959 miles, but we'll get into that. So in this class, I'm doing this teaching, and I find these inconsistencies. So I started really digging at that point into the different cosmological models and not just the creation stories themselves. And what I found was, at every turn, the heliocentric model failed based on its own claims that it is a literal science fiction story that the elites have forced onto us since birth. It is an occult, sun worship religion that we had no choice but to believe, and we're made to believe that we could never question it because it was proven as absolute fact. And this happened from the time we were born, when our parents were born, when their parents were born, we were being taught this stuff. So we have to look at the science and see what's true and what's not. And that's what I did. And I started that was probably 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009, when I really started digging into the cosmological model. And I haven't stopped since. Now, in the past 3 years, I've really been trying to work through all the different models by testing them, and that's what you see here. You see I bought heliocentric models, 2 different kinds. I've got setups where I can set other style heliocentric models up in different ways, just to test different claims that it makes. And I have worked on the 4 main flat earth models, or geocentric earth models, and these 2 are the most prevalent. There's 2 more with other lands where they're easily falsifiable, so I'm not even going to bring them into this. But you have one where you basically have this surface like this, and you have a bunch of little circles of livable lands, and like ours is in the center, Earth, and then Mars is over here, and Jupiter is over here, and Venus is over here. That's easily falsified with observation and science. That's not the real model. That's misinformation. And the other model is basically there are concentric rings of lands outside of the center circle. So there's gaps in the ice wall where you can go and get to these other lands, and then there's gaps in a wall that separates them from the next concentric ring, and you can go to those lands, and nobody knows how many concentric rings of lands there are, but this is where the other suns, Mars, Jupiter, that's what they're teaching, that those are other suns, are circling. That's easily falsifiable with observations as well, things that we can see. So it comes down to the basically Gleason's map with a dome over it and the moon map. And in my test so far, the moon map is the only one that holds up to everything so far. Now, does that mean it won't get falsified the more I test it? Nah, it doesn't. I mean, anything can be falsified. So that's the problem with the heliocentric model. It can't be falsified. And when you back them into a corner, they do a whole bunch of mental gymnastics to avoid saying that. But that's where we're at with the heliocentric model. Well, we know this doesn't work. We know this doesn't work. And we just can't explain it. But the model's still true. We just need more time and we'll come up with a better theory. And that's what they say. And that, you know, in a sense, that's true. That, yeah, if we can't explain things, we don't just throw them out, that we continue to pursue and look for explanations through tests, experiments, demonstrations, observations, and documentation of that. But if the model itself has enormous problems that literally falsify it, and you're still saying that basically you can't falsify it because we can just find new explanations later on as we get smarter. Well, if you have evidence that falsifies it already, it's falsified. So anyway, that's kind of a tangent, but the heliocentric model, if we're honest with ourselves, has been pushed on us from the time we were born, and we were never given another option, ever. Matter of fact, the other options were mocked and made fun of, and that is not education, that's indoctrination. Education is allowing us to see all the models, all the claims of all the models, and deciding which one works for us. That's how it works. Anything else is indoctrination, and sadly to say, we were all indoctrinated extremely heavily. So we're going to deal mainly with these two models, but after about 15 years, the moon map model so far is the most solid model. It answers pretty much every question I can throw at it. There's some things that I still don't have answers for, but that's going to take time. I try to do it as I learn and as I grow and as I get the experiments and demonstrations and stuff like that, observations done, and then figure out how to not only show it, but explain it in a way that's fairly simple before I actually put something out. I've been guilty of not doing that, but I try to really stick to that these days and be very concise in what I'm saying about everything. So the two main flat earth models are basically what most people would consider just a Gleason's map with a dome over it. The other is one that has some steam, I guess you could call it. It's gaining ground, but it's not as well known within the community, is the moon map model. Now, it's known about, but its workings and why it's such a good model is not necessarily known or understood. So with this model, and you can see, people say, do your research, Joe, do your research. Well, I think it's pretty evident. Yeah, I put all this up so that you can see I'm putting in the time, I'm doing the work, and I'm doing it outside of when I'm working. So I do it as a hobby. It's fun for me. It's not something I'm trying to earn money off of or make money off of. I just want people to be able to see the evidence and make a decision for themselves, because the evidence is there that we've been lied to our whole lives. So people say, oh, just go do your research. Well, how many of you have these different models and are testing them constantly? And I'm not trying to be cocky or arrogant. I'm just saying, if you're telling somebody else to go do their research, you should be doing these kind of things. Not only do I have the models, I buy lasers to do laser experiments. I use the laser pointer. Telescopes, lasers, cameras. I mean, stop telling people to do their research that are clearly doing their research. Just stop doing that. It's not cool. especially someone who's been digging for nearly 2 decades into the topic and is only looking to present the true model of a flat earth and its inner workings in a way that makes sense to people, and then let them decide. So all the name calling and all that stuff, that's childish. It's weird. Like, I get messages in Messenger from grown men that I've never met and don't know, calling me all kinds of names and just saying the craziest stuff. First message, like, it's weird. Why does somebody saying, hey, we don't live on a ball, piss you off so bad that you have to verbally assault somebody you don't even know? You've got mental problems. I'm sorry, I'm just telling it like it is. You have mental problems that you need to work on. You don't see, well, I wouldn't say you don't see flat earthers doing that. You don't see the majority of flat earthers doing that. There's still a lot of flat earthers who say and do and act very, very childish as well. So I'm not going to say that we don't have those in our camp as well, but it's overwhelmingly bad in the globe proponent camp. Stop it. Let's have adult conversations where we don't call people names. We discuss the science and the evidence, period. If we can't do that, then we're in a bad place as a society. All right. So I'm going to point some things out on this model because some people seem to not quite understand it. So you got the dome, which is the rakia, right? That's the seal. That's the enclosure of the entire realm. Here you have our livable lands, right? This is our map, our livable lands. You've got a North Pole, magnetic north, and you've got a geographic north, which is somewhere in that area. This two-way mirror here, that's here, represents the ethereal superfluid. This concave mirror here acts as Polaris, basically, the refraction point of Earth's electromagnetic energy coming up from the surface, the entire surface coming up, passing through the ethereal superfluid to the refraction point and back down to the ethereal superfluid in their respective areas as visible light. So the electromagnetic radiation coming up is invisible light. It's not in the visible spectrum. It comes up, it goes through the ether to the refraction point, back down into the ethereal superfluid to create. And you can even see, like, just doing it like this, how you can get constellations and multiple stars from one energy source. But this ethereal superfluid, this two-way mirror represents that. It actually would probably be much lower, but it would fill the entire dome from where it starts, which I believe is roughly 75 miles high, all the way up to the central point of the dome. Now, how far that is, I don't think we can ever really know because we can't get past the ethereal superfluid. And if you look up superfluids, that's what they do. They will literally suspend themselves in the top of their container. So the fact that, and at roughly 75 miles high, the temperature is recorded at negative 454 degrees, which is the level, I'm pretty sure helium-4 superfluid forms at negative 454 degrees. So when we get into the problem of lines of equipotential voltage with the globe, horizontal lines of equipotential voltage with the globe, and how it literally falsifies a spherical Earth and a spherical atmosphere, it also is a problem for this model, because to have horizontal lines of equipotential, you need a horizontal surface at the top, Gaussian surface, 3D Gaussian surface at the top that's horizontal, and one at the bottom. So we obviously have the floor beneath us, which is horizontal, and acts as a 3D Gaussian surface. In this model, there's no second one, so horizontal lines of equipotential are a problem. You add the superfluid, and you've just corrected that problem. You now have a perfect scenario for equipotential lines of voltage across the plane. It's just one of many deep physics topics that this model answers. So I hope you understand the dome and the superfluid. The superfluid fills the entire top of the dome. The superfluid is made up of noble gases. And noble gases, when excited by electromagnetic energy, create light. So that's how we're seeing visible light above us. The superfluid is the medium in which the electromagnetic spectrum focuses into focal points of visible light for us to see. The sun and moon, they are both projections of Earth's electromagnetic energy. So you think of the whole surface of Earth bringing electromagnetic energy up, right? So it's coming up. It's in the invisible spectrum. It converges or culminates to a refracting point at which it is scattered back down in different forms of visible light in different focal points. The main two being the sun and the moon, the positive charge and the negative charge. And it could be argued that, you know, there's no such thing as positive and negative, as charge and discharge. For the sake of simplicity, we're just going to say positive and negative. So the sun is Earth's positive energy, electromagnetic energy, going upwards, converging or culminating at the refraction point, coming back down to a visible focal point of light in the superfluid. The same thing with the moon. It's doing the same thing. Now, the image of Earth is on the moon because of this. So that's what this map under here is. It's literally the moon, where they had just taken and turned the dark spots into the lands, and they actually match. So the whole surface of the Earth is putting up electromagnetic energy. That goes up through the superfluid to the refracting point, back down to a focal point of light. So within that focal point of light, you have an image of the surface of the whole Earth, if that makes sense. It's like an X-ray image within the focal point itself. Now, the focal point is always there, but we don't always see all of it because it kind of acts like a battery indicator or a glow-in-the-dark sticker in a sense. So without any energy input from another source, it's just kind of this translucent focal point that's not super visible. But when you add the sun's positive energy, it charges the moon. So from first quarter moon to full moon, the moon is charging. It's the sun is lighting, pushing energy into the moon, and it's lighting it up as it moves into a position directly across from the sun, which is full moon. So quarter would be over here, full is here, quarter, and then you got your crescents, and then you got your no moon when it's back behind the sun. So it's like a battery indicator on your phone. It's like charging, 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 charged, discharge, 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 discharge. So in the moon does give its own light, but it uses the sun's energy to charge it. Now the crater shadows, they're not craters, they're bubbles, distortions in the plasma of the moon. The moon is a concave focal point of light. It is concave, and in this scenario, it comes up, it hits a concave surface. So it's concave surface where it refracts back to a focal point of visible light would make the visible light focal point concave. It explains the moon cycles. It explains crater shadows because the shadows are always opposite to the sun. The lit side of the moon is always closest to the sun when it's in phase. When it's full, it's furthest away. So in its crescent stages, the crescent lit side is always closest to the sun, whether it's waxing crescent or waning crescent. So the shadows are caused by the sun of the bubbles, distortions on the concave surface. And those bubbles and distortions are really the X-ray image of the surface of the Earth in the focal point of the moon. Now, I hope that's clear. I've done demonstrations on how this model shows us exactly how eclipses, solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, moon phases, the sun, moon, how all that works in this model down to the fine details, and does not work with these systems, with your spinning, wobbling, corkscrewing, water-covered space ball. It doesn't work. Like, it's actually ridiculous that we ever believe this nonsense. The science of optics, astronomy, cosmology, just the properties of water, physics, spectroscopy, everything you want to think of fits in this model. It explains the great year cycle of 26,000 years. It explains, if you wanted to use ice ages as an argument, like we know for sure they actually happened because we witnessed it. We're told it happened in books, and there's evidence that there has been some sort of ice age. So, but this model fits that. The livable circle moves around the larger circle, exposing new lands while burying other lands under ice. It's a wheel within a wheel. The magnetic north moves around geographic north, and that's what causes the shift of the livable realm around the entire realm. It's a self-sustaining system. It allows for times of furlough for the lands. If you look at the Sahara Desert, it's where the sun travels most directly, most often, and it has grown substantially over 200 years, over the last 200 years, according to the measurements and what they tell us, at least, which makes sense. So if the sun's traveling around magnetic north in a circuit, it's traveling over that area more often, it's gonna cause desertification. Well, if it stays there, it's just gonna start scorching everything. Like, further and further outwards, the desert will continue to grow and everything will get scorched. So the magnetic north shifts around the geographic north, carrying the sun and moon in circuit with it, and it buries these lands under ice eventually, and then exposes these new lands as the livable realm rolls around the larger realm. And I hope that makes sense. This is a lot to take in. As far as the science behind everything, I think I had somebody ask me what's making the lights spin. So, you know, the sun and the moon are a projection of the Earth's surface of electromagnetic radiation coming up through the superfluid, refracting off a refracting point, back down into their respective polarities and positions. Well, if you look at Michael Faraday and his studies in electromagnetics and light, so the ether is everything. The ether is in the ocean. The ether is all-consuming. It's throughout everything, and it fills the whole firmament. Let me touch on that. The firmament is not the dome. It is the dome, but the firmament has many layers. So the firmament's everything from the ground to the dome, and actually beneath the ground, there's firmament beneath the ground as well. So beneath our feet anyway. The firmament is everything within the enclosed system, including the enclosure. The dome is the rakia, the celestial dome. The superfluid, it fills the top of that dome. So you have these different layers. You have our atmospheric layer where we live. You have the fish, they live in the water. So everything is really a fluid. Oxygen's a fluid. Fluid dynamics kind of explains all this. So you have fish are in a water, a liquid form of fluid. We're in technically oxygen acts like a liquid, but we're in that gaseous layer of the realm. And then once you get to a certain height, you get the superfluid layer that starts and fills the entire rest of the dome from that point up, creating basically a horizontal ceiling across our entire realm. But people ask me how the light spins. So the ether is influenced by the toroidal field as well. So there's a toroidal field where there's a central vortex and everything is spinning in that electromagnetic toroidal field. Well, when you hit light in a medium with an electromagnetic field, you can get it to spin in different directions, speed up, slow down, do some really cool stuff. So, like I said, look up Michael Faraday, plenty of research on this, and it ties into how all that's working. So I hope that kind of explains how the lights are moving. As far as this model, it could work too if you add the superfluid to it, but there's some problems beyond just that with this model. So for instance, Polaris is not directly over magnetic north, at least as far as I can tell with my telescopes, it's not. Magnetic north is, from my position, I'm facing Polaris kind of that way. Magnetic north is about 5 degrees left of Polaris's position. So in this model, Polaris is dead center. In this model, Polaris would be off of magnetic north somehow, which would make things kind of much different, and it's hard to explain several phenomenon with this model, whereas with this model it all works perfectly so far, to the best that I can figure out. However, I will say this, after 15 years of research, all these people who claim that they got it nailed down and they know this and they know that and the moon does this or the sun does that, and like, stop doing that too. I don't care if you're a flat earther or whatever. Like, none of us have it all figured out. We don't have all the answers. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to put forth very viable scientific explanations, so people can see that there actually are great explanations for this model. So all this fighting and bickering and posturing and pounding one's chest of, this and that and the other, let's just stop that. Let's have adult conversations, break things down, look at it critically, and realize, I think we can all agree that our government has been lying to us our whole lives. Whether you want to believe this meant anything about this or not, you can agree that our government has been lying to us our whole lives. Besides that, I'm going to kind of leave it at that right now. I will do more later, but that's kind of my testimony. The biggest thing with me is Jesus. Jesus is who he says he was, who he said he is, who he said he was. He's the same today, yesterday, and forever. He's unchanging. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the only way to the Father. He is the creator. Like, he's the firstborn of creation who was endowed with the ability to make creation. And my personal studies, I know a lot of people probably don't agree with that, but I do. I believe that Jesus is the architect, if you want to put it that way. And the system tells his story inside and out, upside and down. I mean, from insects to the way the sun and moon move through the constellations, to the scriptures themselves, to our anatomy, to history and prophecy. I mean, he has written himself into everything, our genetic code. His story's there so that we're left without excuse. He is who he said he was, and anyone who spent any serious time studying these so-called coincidences of Scripture will have to at least admit that there is an overwhelming amount of coincidences for it to be just a coincidence. But really, the truth of Scripture has been pointing us to this the whole time. And because we were taught the spinning, floating, wobbling, corkscrewing, speeding, spaceball method from the time we were born, before we ever even read the Scriptures, we go in reading the Scriptures blinded. And it's really sad that believers can't see, a lot of believers can't see that the Scriptures clearly, I mean, Genesis 1, atheists have used it for years, decades, against apologists and evangelists, because they would say, oh, you're so dumb, you don't even realize Genesis 1 teaches the earth's flat. Why should I listen to you? And they had a good point. So I'm going to leave it at that for the moment. Like I said, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. There's so many questions to answer, but I can assure you there are great scientific answers that can be demonstrated in so many ways for the validity of the flat earth model, and I believe this is the correct one. That may change with more testing, but for now, this is it. This is the model that I would put forth and demonstrate for anybody at any time. I hope you guys enjoyed this. God bless you. Remember Jeremiah 33:3.